When both engines died at 9,000 meters, the F-22 fighter pilots monitoring the emergency heard a kid's call sign from the falling airliner. They couldn't believe it. That legendary call sign belonged to a 13-year-old girl sitting in seat 16A. What happened next shocked the entire aviation world forever. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun shone bright over Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Passengers walked through the busy terminal, pulling suitcases and checking their phones. Among them was a thin 13-year-old girl with long black hair tied in a braid. She wore simple jeans, white sneakers, and a gray hoodie. A blue backpack hung from her shoulders. Her name was Sarah Chen, but that wasn't the name that mattered. To everyone who saw her, she looked like any other kid traveling alone. The gate agent smiled at her as she checked her boarding pass. "Sweetie, you're in seat 16A. That's a window seat. The flight attendants will take care of you, okay?" Sarah nodded politely. "Thank you, ma'am." She walked onto Flight 2847 bound for Los Angeles. The Boeing 757 was almost full. Business travelers typed on laptops. Families tried to calm excited children. An elderly man read a newspaper. Sarah found her seat and put her backpack in the overhead bin. She sat down and pulled out a tablet with her homework on it. The flight attendant, a woman named Maria with 15 years of experience, stopped at her row. "Hi there. I'm Maria. What's your name, honey?" "I'm Sarah. I'm going to Los Angeles to visit my aunt for spring break." Maria smiled warmly. "That sounds wonderful. If you need anything, just press this button, okay?" "Thank you, ma'am." Maria walked away, thinking Sarah was just another nice kid flying alone. The businessman in seat 16B barely looked at her as he opened his laptop. The woman across the aisle gave Sarah a quick smile, then returned to her magazine. None of them knew the truth. Hidden in Sarah's backpack was a small wooden plaque with a call sign that had legendary status in military aviation, Viper. This wasn't just any call sign. It had belonged to her great-grandfather, who flew fighter planes in World War II. Then her grandfather earned it flying jets in Vietnam. Her father carried it through 2 wars in the Middle East. And now, at just 13 years old, Sarah had the right to use it too. 2 years ago, Sarah had been at a military air show with her father. A vintage aircraft had engine trouble during a demonstration. The pilot was injured and confused. While adults panicked and ran, Sarah grabbed a radio. She talked the pilot through emergency procedures, step by step, calm and clear. She saved his life. Military generals who investigated the incident were amazed. A 11-year-old girl had performed like a trained professional. They held a special ceremony. Generals and admirals attended. Fighter pilots lined up to shake her hand. They officially gave her the Viper call sign, making her the youngest person in history to carry such an honor. From that day on, Sarah was Viper. But sitting in seat 16A, working on her math homework, she looked like just another kid on just another flight. The captain's voice came over the speakers. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Robert Jackson. We'll be cruising at 9,000 meters today with a flight time of about 4 hours. Weather looks good, so we expect a smooth flight to Los Angeles." The engines powered up. The plane rolled down the runway, faster and faster, until it lifted into the clear blue sky. Everything seemed normal. At 9,000 meters, cruising smoothly over the Rocky Mountains, the first engine failed. There was no warning. Just a sudden loud bang that shook the entire aircraft. Passengers gasped. Some screamed. The plane lurched to one side. In the cockpit, Captain Jackson's hands flew to the controls. His co-pilot, First Officer Lisa Park, was already checking the instruments. "Engine number 1 is dead," Lisa said, her voice tight. "Complete failure. No fuel flow, no thrust. Starting restart procedure, Jackson said. His hands moved across switches and buttons with practiced speed. 30 seconds passed. Nothing happened. The engine stayed dead. Restart failed, Lisa reported. Then, with a sickening thud that every passenger felt in their bones, the second engine died. The plane suddenly became terribly, impossibly quiet. With both engines gone, there was no roar of jet power. Just the whistle of wind passing over the aircraft as it began to glide. A powerless glide. At 9,000 meters. Over mountains. Jackson's voice stayed calm, but his heart pounded. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is United Flight 2847. We have dual engine failure at 30,000 feet, approximately 200 miles west of Denver. Zero thrust on both engines. Requesting immediate emergency assistance. Lisa was already calculating. A Boeing 757 with dead engines could glide for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. They could cover maybe 100 miles. But below them were mountains with few places to land. I'm trying restart procedures again, Jackson said. Roger, Lisa replied, pulling up maps on her screen, searching desperately for any airport, any highway, any flat space where they could put down a powerless airliner. In the cabin, panic was spreading like fire. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, trying to look calm while their own hearts raced. Maria spoke into the intercom, her voice steady despite her fear. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. Return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We're experiencing some technical difficulties, but the pilots are handling it. But passengers could hear the terrible silence where engine noise should be. They could feel the slight downward angle of the gliding plane. Some began crying. Others pulled out phones to send goodbye messages to loved ones. The businessman in 16B gripped his armrests, his face white. The woman across the aisle was praying quietly. A baby was screaming somewhere behind them. Sarah sat still in her window seat, her homework forgotten. She looked out at the mountains below, calculating in her mind. She knew what dual engine failure meant. She had studied it many times with her father. Maria came to row 16 and knelt beside Sarah's seat. She tried to smile, but her eyes were scared. Sarah, honey, I need you to listen carefully. We're going to be okay, but you need to follow all our instructions, all right? Sarah looked at the flight attendant. Both engines failed, didn't they? Maria's rehearsed words caught in her throat. How did this child know that? Before she could answer, Captain Jackson's voice came over the speakers. This time, he couldn't hide the urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have experienced a dual engine failure. We are currently gliding while we attempt to restart the engines. We have declared an emergency. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for a possible emergency landing. The words, emergency landing, triggered chaos. People gasped and cried out. Some screamed. Others grabbed their armrests with white knuckles. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. Honey, you need to sit down, Maria said, reaching for her. But Sarah was already opening the overhead bin. She pulled down her blue backpack and unzipped it. Inside, underneath her clothes and books, was a small aviation radio. Her father had given it to her 2 years ago, after the air show incident. Never use this unless it's a real emergency, he had told her. But if something happens, and your knowledge can help, you have a responsibility to try. Sarah looked out the window again. Gliding. Mountains. Maybe 15 minutes until impact. This was a real emergency. She turned on the radio and tuned it to the emergency frequency. Then she pressed the transmit button. United 2847 flight crew, this is passenger Viper in seat 16A. I have relevant emergency training and aviation knowledge. I am on this frequency if you need assistance. Her voice was young but clear and confident. In the cockpit, Jackson and Lisa froze. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered. "A passenger, calling herself Viper." Jackson said, confused. Miles away and thousands of feet above, two F-22 Raptor stealth fighters were flying a routine patrol over Colorado. Major Tom Hawk Harrison and Captain Kelly Storm Martinez were doing standard operations when the emergency call came through. "Raptor 01, this is Denver Control. We have a civilian airliner with dual engine failure, descending through 27,000 feet. Requesting you intercept and provide assistance." "Copy that, Control," Hawk replied. "Raptor 01 and 02 are inbound." Both F-22s turned sharply and accelerated. Their advanced radar systems locked onto Flight 2847. As they got closer, Hawk pulled up the passenger information that had been uploaded to their systems for emergency coordination. He scanned the list of 183 passengers and 6 crew members. Then he saw something that made him do a double-take. "Storm, are you seeing this?" he radioed to his wingman. "Passenger in seat 16A has a military call sign in the database." Captain Martinez checked her screen. Her eyes went wide. "Viper," she breathed. "Hawk, that's the Viper call sign. For generations. That air show saved 2 years ago. Every pilot knows that story. But the manifest says this passenger is 13 years old," Hawk said slowly. "This has to be a mistake. Control, Raptor 01. Can you confirm the identity of passenger Viper aboard United 2847? There was a long pause while the controller checked and double-checked. "Raptor 01, confirmation is positive. Passenger Sarah Chen, age 13, unaccompanied minor. Call sign verified through military family database. This is an actual Viper legacy holder aboard that aircraft." Hawk felt chills run down his spine. He had been at a military conference where they showed video of that air show incident. He had heard the audio of a 11-year-old girl calmly directing an injured pilot through emergency procedures. He had listened to generals say that this child had earned her call sign through genuine courage and skill. And now that legendary call sign was aboard a powerless aircraft falling from the sky. The F-22s pulled alongside Flight 2847. Hawk could see the airliner clearly, its wings level and steady despite having no engine power. The pilots aboard were doing good work. But the aircraft was descending at about 1,500 feet per minute. He positioned his fighter off the right wing and looked at the engines. Both cowlings showed no signs of rotation. No heat shimmer. Just dead metal hanging beneath the wings. "United 2847, this is Raptor 01, United States Air Force. We are off your right wing and have visual confirmation of dual engine failure. We are coordinating with emergency services and will escort you." In the cockpit, Jackson acknowledged the transmission with grim relief. At least they had military support, even if it couldn't solve their immediate problem of flying a glider that used to be an airliner. Then, over the emergency frequency, they heard it again. "United 2847, this is Viper. I can assist with glide optimization and coordination with your military escorts to reach the best landing site." Jackson looked at Lisa. That voice belongs to a kid. Lisa had pulled up the passenger manifest. She found seat 16A. "Captain, the database shows a military call sign for this passenger. Says she received official recognition 2 years ago for saving a pilot's life during an air show emergency." Jackson made a decision. In emergencies, you use every resource available. "Viper, this is United 2847 Captain. Confirm you have emergency aviation expertise." "Confirmed, Captain," Sarah's voice came back. "For generations of fighter pilot family knowledge. I can help with calculations and military coordination." Jackson nodded to Lisa. "Let's accept the help." He keyed his radio. "Viper, United 2847 Captain. We accept your assistance. What do you recommend? In the cabin, Sarah stood in the aisle with her radio, ignoring the shocked stares from nearby passengers. Maria had stopped trying to make her sit down. Something about the way this girl spoke into that radio made the flight attendant pause. Sarah pressed the transmit button again. All aircraft, Viper recommends the following: reduce airspeed to best glide speed for a Boeing 757, which is approximately 200 knots. Increase angle of attack slightly to optimize your lift-to-drag ratio. Minimize use of flight controls to reduce drag. In his F-22, Hawk felt professional respect wash over him. Every word she had said was correct. This was precise technical knowledge that came from deep understanding. United 2847, Raptor 01 confirms Viper's recommendations are accurate. We've calculated a dry lake bed 40 miles southeast as your best option. At current descent rate, you have approximately 12 minutes to cover the distance. In the cockpit, Jackson adjusted his airspeed to match Sarah's recommendation. The plane's glide performance improved slightly as he found the sweet spot where lift and drag balanced perfectly. Lisa was frantically working the navigation system, plotting their course to the dry lake bed. Her calculations showed they would arrive with maybe 1,000 feet of altitude remaining. Enough to set up an approach, but with zero room for error. Sarah continued providing guidance, her inherited knowledge flowing naturally. Captain, I recommend you use your remaining altitude to position for a straight-in approach to the lake bed. Don't waste energy on turns or circling. The F-22 escorts can guide you using their navigation systems to align with the best part of the landing surface. Roger, Viper, Jackson acknowledged. Hawk immediately began coordinating the approach. His F-22's sophisticated computer calculated the perfect flight path that would bring the gliding airliner to the lake bed with maximum remaining energy. The passengers nearby were beginning to understand what was happening. Sarah, the quiet kid with homework, was talking to the pilots like she had been doing it her whole life. The businessman in 16B had closed his laptop. He was staring at Sarah with his mouth slightly open. The elderly woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, "That child is helping fly the plane." "That's impossible," he whispered back. "Listen to her," his wife said. "She sounds like a pilot." Sarah didn't notice their stares. She was focused completely on the problem. In her mind, she could see the calculations her father had taught her. Glide ratio. Rate of descent. Distance to target. Wind drift. She keyed the radio again. "Captain, recommend you account for westerly winds at 15 knots. Adjust your heading 3 degrees east to compensate for drift during final approach." Adjusting heading, Jackson confirmed. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. The plane continued its steady descent. Through the windows, passengers could see the mountains getting closer and closer. Some were crying. Others sat frozen in fear. But in the cockpit, Jackson and Lisa were working with intense focus, guided by recommendations from a 13-year-old girl and sophisticated navigation data from 2 F-22 fighters. 10 minutes to the lake bed, Lisa announced. "Descent rate is good," Jackson said. "We're going to make it." Sarah pressed transmit again. "Captain, at 5,000 feet, you should deploy landing gear. It will increase drag and steepen your descent, but you need to be configured for landing before you arrive." "Understood, Viper." Maria had been standing near Sarah, listening to everything. She felt tears forming in her eyes. This child was saving them. All of them. "How do you know all this?" Maria whispered. Sarah glanced at her briefly. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father were all fighter pilots. They taught me everything. In my family, aviation knowledge is passed down like family stories. But you're just a kid, Maria said softly. Sarah looked back out the window. My father always told me, the Viper call sign isn't about age. It's about rising up when people need you. About having the courage to act when it matters. She pressed transmit again. Raptor 01, Viper. Can you confirm emergency response teams are positioned at the lake bed? Affirmative, Viper, Hawk replied. Fire and rescue are in position. Ambulances standing by. You've given them enough time to prepare. Thank you, Raptor 01. In his cockpit, Hawk shook his head in amazement. He had thousands of hours of flight time. He had flown combat missions in 2 different wars. And here he was, taking coordination guidance from a teenager who spoke with the calm professionalism of a seasoned combat controller. Storm, are you listening to this? He radioed his wingman. I am, Captain Martinez replied. That kid is remarkable. Viper is living up to the legend. 5,000 feet, Lisa called out. Deploying landing gear. Jackson pulled the gear lever. There was a heavy thunk as the wheels extended and locked into place. The plane shuddered as the drag increased. Their descent rate steepened. Gear down and locked, Lisa confirmed. Through the windscreen, they could see the lake bed now. A pale oval of flat land surrounded by rocky terrain. It looked rough and uneven from this altitude. Sarah's voice came over the radio one more time. Captain, remember to flare gently at touchdown. Touchdown with minimum vertical speed. The surface might be softer than expected. You want to avoid nose gear collapse. Keep the wings level throughout the landing roll. Copy, Viper, Jackson said. And, thank you. In the cabin, the flight attendants had everyone in brace positions. Heads down, hands clasped behind necks. Some passengers were praying. Others were silently saying goodbye. Sarah sat back down in 16A and put her radio away. She fastened her seatbelt and assumed the brace position like everyone else. Her job was done. Now it was all up to Captain Jackson. Maria squeezed her hand. You saved us, the flight attendant whispered. Sarah squeezed back but said nothing. The lake bed rushed up to meet them. From the F-22s flying above, Hawk and Storm watched with hearts pounding. They had seen enough aviation accidents to know how many things could go wrong in the next 30 seconds. At 500 feet, Jackson began his flare. He pulled back gently on the controls, trading forward speed for lift to reduce their rate of descent. At 100 feet, the ground filled the windscreen. At 50 feet, passengers who dared to look could see individual rocks and bushes. At 10 feet, Jackson held the nose up, bleeding off speed. The main landing gear hit the lake bed with a jarring thump that shook the entire aircraft. It was harder than any normal landing, but the gear held. Dust and sand exploded up around them. Jackson fought to keep the wings level as the unprepared surface grabbed at the wheels with uneven friction. The nose gear slammed down with a sharp crack. For a horrible second, he thought it had broken. But it held. The plane rolled across the lake bed, trailing huge plumes of dust. The soft surface worked like a brake, slowing them down faster than any runway. Inside the cabin, passengers held their breath. Each second felt like an hour. The aircraft bounced and shuddered over the rough terrain. Overhead bins rattled. The frame groaned under stress. Would the landing gear collapse? Would they flip over? Would the wings break apart? They rolled, and rolled, metal screaming in protest, and slowed, dust clouds completely blocking the windows, and finally, after what felt like forever, they stopped. Flight 2847 sat at a slight angle on the uneven ground. But they were down. They were intact. They were alive. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. The silence was profound. Then someone started laughing. Then crying. Then everyone was doing both at once. People hugged strangers. They kissed the seats in front of them. They looked at each other with the stunned expressions of people who had just cheated death. In that moment, it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, young or old, from New York or Tokyo. Everyone aboard had shared the same impossible journey from certain death to miraculous survival. Jackson sat in his seat, hands still on the controls, unable to move. His co-pilot Lisa was crying openly, not bothering to hide her tears. They had done it. Against every odd, against physics itself, they had brought their aircraft down safely. "We're alive," Lisa whispered. "We're actually alive." Jackson nodded, not trusting his voice to speak. Then Jackson keyed the intercom. His voice shook with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are on the ground. Emergency evacuation will begin immediately. Follow all crew instructions and exit the aircraft as quickly and safely as possible." The cabin erupted. People were crying, hugging each other, thanking God. The flight attendants opened the emergency exits and deployed the slides. "Go, go, go!" Maria shouted. "Everyone out!" Passengers slid down the emergency chutes and ran away from the aircraft. Some fell to their knees on the dusty ground, sobbing with relief. Others stood in shock, unable to believe they had survived. Sarah came down the slide and stumbled a bit as she landed. Her legs felt weak, like jelly. The adrenaline that had kept her focused and calm was draining away now, leaving her shaking. She looked at her hands and saw them trembling. Maria was right behind her and immediately wrapped the girl in a fierce hug. "You saved us," Maria sobbed into Sarah's hair. "You saved every single person. Oh God, you're just a baby and you saved us all." Sarah hugged her back, and suddenly she couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears came in great heaving sobs. All the fear she had pushed down during the emergency came flooding out. She had been so scared. Terrified. But she couldn't show it then. Her father had taught her, when people are counting on you, you push the fear down. You deal with it later. Now was later. "I was so scared," Sarah whispered between sobs. "I thought we were all going to die. I kept thinking about my dad, and my mom, and I thought I'd never see them again." Maria held her tighter, rocking her gently. "But you didn't let that fear stop you. You were brave. The bravest person I've ever met." Around them, other passengers were starting to understand. The businessman from 16B approached hesitantly. His expensive suit was covered in dust, his hair a mess, but he didn't care. "You're the one on the radio," he said to Sarah. "You're the one who helped the pilots." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "I thought you were just some kid playing on her phone," he said, his voice breaking. "I barely looked at you. And you saved my life. You saved my wife, my kids. I get to go home to them because of you." He knelt down to her level, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Above them, the two F-22s made a low pass over the lake bed. Hawk and Storm wanted to verify visually that everyone had survived. Then Hawk made a decision. "Control, Raptor 01. United 2847 is safely on the ground. All passengers evacuated successfully. Request permission to render honors." The controller, who had listened to the entire emergency, approved immediately. The two F-22s came around for one final pass. They flew in tight formation directly over the evacuated passengers and crew, low enough that everyone could see the distinctive shape of the advanced stealth fighters clearly. As they passed overhead, both pilots rolled their aircraft in the traditional military salute. A gesture of respect normally reserved for fallen warriors or the most distinguished achievements. Most passengers didn't understand what they were seeing. But some did. "Did those fighters just salute us?" the businessman from 16B asked, amazed. "No," said the elderly man who had been reading the newspaper. "They saluted her." He pointed at Sarah. Everyone turned to look at the 13-year-old girl standing with the flight attendant's arms around her. "Who is she?" someone asked. "I heard her on the radio," another passenger said. "She was giving instructions to the pilots." Talking to those fighter jets. That's impossible. She's just a kid. But the evidence was right there. The F-22s were streaking away into the blue sky, and this quiet girl with the blue backpack had somehow been central to their survival. Rescue helicopters arrived within minutes. Emergency vehicles came bouncing across the desert terrain. Medical teams began checking passengers for injuries. Captain Jackson made his way through the crowd, searching for Sarah. When he found her, he approached formally and extended his hand. "Viper, I'm Captain Jackson. I want to thank you personally. Your knowledge and guidance contributed directly to the survival of everyone aboard this aircraft. I will document this in my official report." Sarah shook his hand with a firm grip. "Captain, you and First Officer Park deserve all the credit. You brought this plane down safely under impossible conditions. The Viper legacy is about helping when needed. I'm honored I could contribute." Jackson felt his throat tighten. These were words he might expect from a veteran pilot, not a 13-year-old kid. Over the next hours, as everyone was transported to hospitals for evaluation, the story began to leak to the media. A reporter monitoring emergency frequencies had heard some of the radio transmissions. When she heard that a child had helped coordinate the emergency response, she started digging. By that evening, Sarah's name and story were all over the news. By the next morning, she was on the front page of every major newspaper. 13-year-old Viper saves 189 lives in miracle landing. Girl with legendary call sign guides powerless airliner to safety. Fighter pilots salute teen aviation expert after emergency. The story went viral across the world. Videos from passengers' phones showing Sarah standing in the aisle with her radio. Audio recordings of her clear, calm voice giving instructions. Interview clips with amazed passengers describing what they had witnessed. Sarah became famous overnight. Her father flew to meet her as soon as he heard the news. When they reunited at the hospital, he held her for a long time without speaking. He understood what she had experienced. The crushing weight of knowing that lives depended on your performance. The responsibility that came with the Viper call sign. "You honored our family," he whispered. "Your great-grandfather would be so proud. Your grandfather would be proud. I am so proud of you." Sarah finally cried then, letting out all the fear and stress she had held inside during the emergency. The military aviation community responded with overwhelming support. Air Force generals issued statements commending her actions. Fighter squadrons around the country held informal ceremonies honoring Viper. Experienced combat pilots expressed their respect for a 13-year-old who had demonstrated grace under pressure that matched any warrior they had known. Major Harrison and Captain Martinez requested permission to visit Sarah several months later. They met at an Air Force base where her father was stationed. When they walked in and saw the teenager in jeans and a t-shirt, they felt the disconnect between the image and the memory of that professional voice on the radio. But they shook her hand with formal respect. "Viper, Storm and I wanted to tell you in person," Hawk said. "Escorting your emergency was one of the most profound experiences of our careers. Hearing your call sign, understanding what it represented, and then listening to you perform under pressure with such skill reminded us why we do what we do. You honor that call sign and your family legacy in ways that inspire all of us." Sarah thanked them, composed as always. But later, watching the two F-22s take off for their return flight, she allowed herself to cry again. Tears of understanding. She was part of something bigger than herself. A legacy that transcended age. A tradition of courage when courage was needed. The formal investigation into the engine failures revealed that a rare manufacturing defect had caused simultaneous catastrophic failures in both engines. The investigators' report specifically cited the coordinated efforts of the flight crew, the F-22 escort pilots, and passenger Sarah "Viper" Chen as contributing factors in the survival of all souls aboard. It marked the first time in aviation history that a child passenger had been officially recognized in an accident investigation report for providing expert assistance during an emergency. The report's conclusion included a statement: the Viper call sign once again lived up to its legendary status, rising from impossible circumstances to ensure survival when all conventional expectations suggested catastrophe. For Sarah, life eventually returned to something like normal, though she would never again be underestimated. She completed her interrupted trip to Los Angeles, though her aunt could barely believe the news reports about what had happened. The passengers from Flight 2847 stayed in touch with Sarah over the years. Many sent letters expressing gratitude that words could never fully convey. Maria, the flight attendant, visited several times, bringing cookies and updates about her life. The two had formed a deep bond during those desperate minutes in the sky. The businessman from seat 16B wrote Sarah a letter apologizing for underestimating her, for seeing only a child with a tablet instead of recognizing the extraordinary capability that existed beneath surface appearances. Years later, when Sarah became old enough to pursue her own military aviation career, she would look back on that day at 9,000 meters as the moment she truly understood what the Viper call sign meant. It wasn't just about family heritage or honorary recognition. It was about rising when circumstances demanded it. About finding courage and expertise when lives depended on perfect performance under impossible pressure. The story became part of military aviation lore. It was told and retold in ready rooms and training facilities. The day when Viper rose at 9,000 meters and proved that some legacies were earned not through age or rank, but through courage to act when action was required. Sarah would grow and change and eventually have her own distinguished career. But she would never forget standing in the aisle of a powerless aircraft with a radio in her hands, speaking calmly to professionals who trusted her despite every reason to doubt. Coordinating an emergency response that saved 189 lives because 4 generations of aviators had passed down knowledge and courage. At 9,000 meters, when the engines failed and death seemed certain, a kid with a legendary call sign showed the world what it truly meant to honor a legacy. The F-22s heard her voice, recognized her call sign, and witnessed her rise when rising was required. And in doing so, she confirmed what every Viper aviator had always known: courage and competence recognize no limits of age when legacy and circumstance meet in moments that demand the very best that human capability can offer.